following is a special presentation of MTN, the Montana Television Network. From Yellowstone Public Radio and MTN News, this is Montana's House Debate. Now, here's your moderator, Tim McGonigal.
And good evening and welcome to MTN and Yellowstone Public Radio's coverage of Montana's U.S. House Debate. I'm Tim McGonigal. We're coming to you from our MTN studio in Helena, where tonight the three candidates vying for Montana's lone seat in the U.S. House will be answering questions from a distinguished panel of Montana journalists. And we'd like to thank the candidates for taking time out of the busy campaign schedule to let the voters know a little bit more about each and every one of you. So before we begin with questions, let's learn a little bit more about each of these candidates.
Republican Congressman Greg Gianforte was elected to the post in a special election in May of last year. He also was the Republican candidate for governor in 2016, losing to Democratic Governor Steve Bullock. Mr. Gianforte lives in Bozeman, where he and his wife Susan co-founded a software development company in the mid-1990s. Right Now Technologies was sold to Oracle in 2012 for $1.8 billion. The Gianfortes, who have 4 children, also run a family charitable foundation that has donated more than $50 million to nonprofit and religious organizations in Montana and around the world. Kathleen Williams won a 6-person primary in June to become the Democratic nominee in this race. She's a former state representative from Bozeman. She has resource management degrees from the University of California at Berkeley and Colorado State University, and has spent her career as a natural resource and recreation specialist. Her most recent job was Associate Director for the Western Landowners Alliance, a group of conservation-minded farmers and ranchers. Ms. Williams has 2 grown stepsons. Eleanor Swanson is the Libertarian candidate in this contest. It's her first time running for office. Ms. Swanson spent her formative years in Alaska and is now a wife, mother of 4, and attorney in Billings. She met her husband David in medical school in Colorado, but later chose to study law. She says the evidence-based first do-no-harm mentality of medicine influenced her political views, but that she didn't become a libertarian until law school.
And now that we've met the candidates, let's go over quickly the ground rules for tonight's debate. The order of candidates answering questions has been predetermined. The candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the panelist question. The other 2 candidates will have a 30-second rebuttal, and the candidate who was first asked the question will finish with a 30-second response. And the moderator and panelists can ask for clarification or a follow-up question. And at the end of the debate, each candidate will have 90 seconds for a closing statement. And now, as I said, we have a very distinguished panel of panelists tonight. We're also, as we said, working in conjunction with Yellowstone Public Radio to bring you tonight's debate. And our panelist from Yellowstone Public Radio is the senior political correspondent, Jackie Yamanaka. Thank you, Jackie. We also have from our MTN affiliate KTVH in Billings, we have the new news anchor and reporter from the Magic City, Samantha Sullivan. Thank you, Samantha. And finally, we have MTN's chief political reporter, Mike Dennison. He is based in Helena and a longtime fixture on the political scene in the state of Montana. Mike has tonight's opening question, and it goes to Eleanor Swanson.
Ms. Swanson, welcome to the debate. Thank you for being here. And also, we should say that her husband's name is Dan, not David, as we said incorrectly in the intro. So I just want to get that straight right off the bat. Libertarian candidates typically get between 2% and 6% of the vote in statewide elections in Montana. How is the party and the candidates to be taken seriously if they seldom ever win anything?
Well, the Libertarian Party has seen amazing growth recently. We're about to have our first U.S. Senator, Kerry Johnston, in New Mexico. Larry Sharp is also polling very well in New York. We have almost 200 elected representatives around the country. Montana has the most Libertarians per capita of any state. This year we have 23 people running. We have an immense just upsurge of support and excitement for the Libertarian Party, with 12 people running against either only a Democrat or only a Republican.
All right. Kathleen Williams, do you have a rebuttal?
Well, I'll just say that I have a bit of a libertarian streak too, but I chose to run under the Democratic Party. But I've always been a real independent thinker and independent voter, and that's evident in my 3 terms in the legislature, where I worked with people of all political stripes to just roll up my sleeves and solve problems for Montana. We really have a hyper-partisan issue out in Washington. Congress is about as close to broken as I can imagine, and I look forward to bringing that nonpartisan approach to Congress.
And Congressman Gianforte.
Well, I want to speak to the people at home and say I am honored to be your congressman back in Washington. It's a tremendous honor for me to serve you in that way. And this election is really about competing ideas. We have, on one hand, the question is, are we going to stand with President Trump to deliver results for the people of Montana, or join the resistance and join Nancy Pelosi? I'm proud of what we accomplished so far, getting our economy going. I look forward to the discussion tonight.
And Eleanor Swanson, you have 30 seconds to respond.
You know, I think one thing about libertarians is that it's a principle, and we stick to principle over party. So at least with a libertarian, you really know what you're getting. You're not going to elect someone on the campaign of limited government and then get a big government candidate.
All right, thank you. We'll continue with our questions now. And the question is from Jackie Yamanaka to Kathleen Williams.
Welcome, Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Jackie.
On gun violence, you've said you want to regulate AR-15s and have background checks. What is that going to look like, and how will that impact Montanans?
Thanks for the question, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to answer this, because Congressman Gianforte is running absolutely false ads about my stances on guns. I am a gun owner, I'm a hunter, I support the Second Amendment. My husband and I spent summers working in youth hunting education programs, raising a new generation of sportsmen and women in Montana, which is so critical. But I will say that children deserve to feel safe in school, and parents deserve to know that their children are going to come home safe from school. So I am not afraid. I am not cowed by special interests, and I'm not afraid to have a public discussion about how to keep kids safe in school. I am willing to stand up to that, and Congress has just done nothing as far as providing leadership. Congress and Congressman Gianforte have done nothing about the issues related to safety in our schools.
Congressman Gianforte, your turn.
Well, as I travel around the state talking with people, protecting the Montana way of life is critical. That's why I'll always stand on the Second Amendment. And you might hear some difference of opinions up here tonight, but let me just share the facts with you. I am A-rated by the NRA. Kathleen Williams has an F. I'm endorsed by the NRA and the Montana Shooting Sports Association. I also think we need to keep our schools safe. That's why Congress this year passed the STOP Act to provide training for school officers to make sure we do that. But we cannot restrict law-abiding citizens to prevent criminal acts. I'll always stand on the Second Amendment.
Thank you, Congressman. Eleanor Swanson, your rebuttal.
Yes, I just want to say that, you know, being a hunter does not mean that you support gun rights. You know, I know Ms. Williams voted against constitutional carry, that people should not carry concealed if they're otherwise legally able to. She voted against letting schools decide whether and when people on campuses should be armed. And to me, that is absolutely against the Second Amendment. There is a human right to self-defense and defense of others, and we need to respect and uphold that.
Ms. Williams, you have a 30-second response.
Thank you. Yes, I did vote against deregulating college campuses and prohibiting them from having any gun-related storage policies. When I was in the legislature, I got calls from panicked parents saying they never would have sent their children here to college if they thought there was going to be no opportunity for colleges to say how guns should be stored. It's very reasonable. Also, I have the support of the Montana Sportsmen's Association, or Alliance, which I'm very proud of.
Thank you. Our next question goes from MTN's Samantha Sullivan. It goes to Congressman Gianforte.
Thanks so much for being here, Representative. Just yesterday, you voted against a spending bill that would keep the government open, saying it was irresponsible. But you also voted yesterday to make more tax cuts permanent. Why do you support those cuts if they could greatly increase the federal debt?
So I think people at home know this as I've traveled the state. We have a spending problem in Washington. I voted for rebuilding the military and securing our border. But when we get a bill back from the Senate where Chuck Schumer has added excess domestic spending, I'm going to vote against it because you've given me very clear marching orders. In fact, this year, the U.S. government has record income. We don't have a revenue problem in Washington. We have a spending problem. I'm proud of the tax cuts we put in place last fall because it's spurred our economy. We have higher wages. We have the lowest unemployment in a long time and more jobs. This has generated increased revenue for the U.S. government, and this is the way we're going to ultimately balance the budget, is by getting our economy going and holding the line on spending, which is what I did this week in Congress for you.
Tim, I'd like to ask a follow-up question real quick.
Absolutely.
No responsible economist or budget analyst has said that we can erase the revenue lost from tax cuts solely by increased economic activity.
Yeah, so thanks for the follow-up question. Let me go through the math because it's pretty straightforward. Every percentage point of GDP growth that we experience here in this country is equivalent to about $3 trillion of federal tax revenue over a 10-year period. Under the Obama era, we had anemic growth, less than 2%. It's forecasted to be 4.6% in Q4. This means an increase of almost $9 trillion over the next 10 years. That was a good investment, the tax cuts, because we put more money in your pocket.
All right, Ms. Swanson, your rebuttal.
For every $20 that Americans make, the federal government takes 3, borrows 1, and spends 4. Now, whatever you feel about the tax cuts, federal revenues were up 2 cents on that same scale, 2 cents for every $4 of federal spending. So the tax cuts are really irrelevant to the magnitude of our spending problem.
Thank you. And Ms. Williams, your chance for a rebuttal.
Yeah, I mean, the Congressional Budget Office, all the folks that do the projections on debt, I mean, basically said that the tax cuts add, and I'll say a tax giveaway, added $1.9 trillion to the debt. The most recent decisions as well added another $2.9 trillion. And not only is it the debt, but the tax giveaway is benefiting the wealthy. 83% of the benefit goes to the top 1%.
Thank you. Congressman Gianforte.
Well, I'm proud of the work we've done in Congress this year. And as I've traveled the state, I've heard many stories about people's paychecks getting larger. There's a single mom right here in Helena that the story was relayed. She's raising 3 kids by herself. That's a tough job. She had a car that didn't work that well. After the tax cuts that the Republicans put in place last December, her paycheck here in Helena went up $400. That's allowed her to get a more reliable car and made the American dream brighter for her. I'm proud of what we've done there. And we didn't have a single Democrat vote in the House or the Senate for that tax bill that made wages larger for Montanans.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next question comes from Jackie Yamanaka, and it's directed towards Eleanor Swanson.
Ms. Swanson, I'd like to continue the tax cut conversation. You've said your #1 issue is to reduce the federal deficit. The Trump tax cut is going to increase the deficit. Do you support the tax cut? And if so, what programs would you specifically cut then to bring down the deficit?
Well, as I said, the tax cut is really irrelevant to this magnitude of our spending and debt problem. We went from no deficit in 1931 to having more debt in our country than any other country in the entire world. We can tax, everyone earning over $1 million, and we still would only get 36 cents more for every $4 of federal spending. We could raise corporate tax rates. Generally in economics, you want to tax something if you want less of it. But hey, raise corporate tax rates. Well, effectively you're going to double tax Americans working and building businesses, and you're going to drive business overseas. We just reduced corporate tax rates from 35 to 21%, and yet federal revenue again went up 2%, or sorry, 0.02%. There's a lot of areas that we absolutely need to cut, not our, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We need to make those fiscally sustainable, fiscally responsible.
Jackie.
I'd like to follow up and then zero in then on cuts. So what programs, departments? I mean, what would you specifically cut then?
Absolutely. We have 430 federal agencies that are pretty much new. You know, we have an explosion of unconstitutional congressional authorizations for these agencies. I would eliminate or very much reduce all of them. There's no separation of powers. They have the same entity doing each one of those 3 jobs within the agency. They were not accountable to the public. We didn't elect these folks.
Kathleen Williams, your chance for rebuttal.
Yeah, let me say that I support tax cuts. It's wonderful to have more dollars in the pockets of working families and agricultural businesses and small businesses. But this wasn't a tax cut that just benefited small income earners. Again, it gave 85% of the results to the top 1%. Warren Buffett made $29 billion off of this and didn't even ask for it. I have experience in the legislature lowering taxes and passing responsible fiscal policy, and I'll take that to Washington.
And Congressman Gianforte, your rebuttal.
Well, as I've traveled the state every weekend, and I'm proud of the fact that I have not spent a weekend in Washington, D.C. yet, getting back here every weekend. Tax cuts, Montanans know, you know, that they're working for Montana. I was talking to a public school teacher in Billings whose check went up $130 a month. We cannot afford to go back to the failed Obama-Pelosi policies that stagnated our economy for a decade.
Thank you. And Eleanor Swanson, you have a 30-second response.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that Ms. Williams voted against reducing taxes paid by the bottom 1%, those Montanans paying less than $2,700 per year. Mr. Gianforte voted to increase federal spending. He voted to increase the debt cap without spending reform. He voted for a $900 million East Coast rail line, $1.1 billion on Amtrak. He voted for FISA, the Patriot Act, the degradation of our Fourth Amendment rights, and it needs to be talked about.
All right, our next question goes from KTVQ's Samantha Sullivan, and it is directed to Kathleen Williams.
Ms. Williams, I'd like to ask you about health care. You've placed a lot of emphasis on health care. Do you think health care is a fundamental right for all citizens? And if so, how do we make that happen? And then how do we pay for it?
Thank you. And many of you know that health care is personal for me. When I was 11, my father and I became caregivers for my mother with early onset Alzheimer's. So I know what an illness can do to a family. That said, all Montanans need to have the opportunity for affordable, accessible health care. And I have a fairly detailed plan on how we can get to that, including allowing people 55 and older to buy into Medicare. The plan is on our website, and we really need to ensure that we're lowering costs and adding accessibility. My opponent Congressman Gianforte expressed support for the Graham-Cassidy bill that would have prohibited the protection for pre-existing conditions. It would have raised costs on our seniors, and it would have knocked thousands of Montanans off their medical care. We need better, and we can do better.
Congressman Gianforte, your rebuttal.
Well, I want to be clear, and we need health care reform because Obamacare is not working. My principles are simple. We need to preserve rural access. We need to protect people with pre-existing conditions. That's why I've co-sponsored legislation that will do exactly that. We have been acting. Obamacare has driven costs up and benefits down. That's why we enacted expanded HSAs, association health care plans. We need to give consumers more options, not move to a government-run, one-size-fits-all system, which will bankrupt this country.
All right, and Eleanor Swanson, your rebuttal.
I believe in free markets, free minds, and free people. Now, the CBO says that Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are not on a fiscally sustainable trajectory. No matter what your political views, that is the case. If we want to preserve these programs for the future, we have to act now and put them on a better path. And I would also like to give people the option of choosing different choices if they want to on the free market.
And Kathleen Williams, your response.
Well, again, Congressman Gianforte says one thing and does another. He wouldn't answer the question from the reporter, the special election, and then expressed favoritism for the health care thing, as he said, being passed. The ACA is not being a failure. It's Congress picking it apart, bone by bone by bone, and not fulfilling their commitments to lower healthcare premiums that is causing double-digit increases in costs, and that's unacceptable.
All right, our next question comes from Mike Dennison, and it's for Congressman Gianforte.
Representative Gianforte, do you agree with the president that much of the media is dishonest and an enemy of the people? And do you think it's okay for him, as he did in Billings earlier this month, to make light of your assault of a reporter last year?
Well, I can't speak for the president. I know that I've had a chance to work closely with him. I've met with him in the Oval Office. I've been on Air Force One twice, here recently flying out for rallies in Montana. And I am proud of the work that he's doing to get our economy going again and create opportunities for Americans and make the American dream more attainable. I think that the relationship with I know I enjoy good working relationships at the state level with our media here, and have made myself very available. And I plan to continue to do that, meeting at every opportunity that I can.
But what do you think of his characterizations of the media that he makes frequently?
You know, I can't speak for the president specifically on individual comments. I do know that in my personal interactions with him, he's been straightforward, and I know he loves this country, and his heart is in it, and I stand with the president.
And Eleanor Swanson, your response.
The media does tend to focus on what drives news. So there's a focus on the negative, and people tend to think that that is what's happening. NBC did edit the Trayvon Martin video to make things look worse, that there have been some cases of media acting a bit nefariously. I love the diverse proliferation of media options we have. We have social media, we have all this media, and I want, you know, First Amendment jurisprudence to be upheld in that arena. We've established it. It's a great First Amendment protection. I hope it continues to thrive.
And Kathleen Williams, your rebuttal.
Yes, I mean, I can say without a doubt that I appreciate the media. In fact, every time I'm being interviewed and I'm asked, is there anything you want to add, I always thank the journalists that are working so hard to bring us news and uncover facts. I will say, too, that the body slam of a reporter was one aspect of it, Congressman, but lying about it was, I think, something we also need to remember. We need to ensure that we have honorable, honest, statesman-like people in Congress, and we need to replace the one we have.
And Congressman Gianforte.
Well, I'll be the first one to say I'm not perfect, and I have regret for what happened last year. I took full responsibility, and the incident's been fully covered. And since then, I've been working my tail off for the state and enjoying it, traveling back to every single county within 60 days after getting elected, and then continuing to come home to know I know your voice so I can carry it back to Washington, where we need to push back on federal overreach.
Thank you. Our next question is from Samantha Harrelson, and it goes to Eleanor Swanson.
Ms. Swanson, when Denny Rehberg held this same office, he took pride in holding in-person, publicly accessible town hall meetings in all 56 counties here in the state. Would you be willing to make that commitment to Montanans tonight if you were elected?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
All right.
And then I guess, you know, I'll use, I don't know.
Kathleen Williams, your rebuttal.
Absolutely. I'm committed to holding open meetings. In fact, Congressman Gianforte, when he proposed his Wilderness Study Area Release Act that would eliminate protections for over 700,000 acres of Montana's public lands, refused to take any open public comment. So my team and I, we held a public meeting, and we proved that Montanans can come together, whether they're passionate on any side of an issue, and have civil dialogue and learn from each other. And we invited you, Congressman, and I will take that forward to Congress.
Congressman Gianforte, your rebuttal.
Well, people are entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts. Since I've been elected, I've been to every corner of this state. We've had over 200,000 inquiries from Montanans that we've responded to individually. I've done over 100 live radio calls, and many of those we take live callers without anything, with any screening. In addition, I've done teletown halls every month. I would argue I've probably been more accessible than anybody that's filled this seat before, and I will continue to operate in that manner.
And Eleanor Swanson, you have a 30-second response.
I believe in transparency. I have personally responded to all questions in the forum in which they're asked. I've responded to every survey, every phone call, every email personally, every question on Facebook in the forum in which it's asked. I will continue to do that so long as I am able.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mike Dennison, and it goes to Kathleen Williams.
Ms. Williams, Congressman Gianforte has made this election something of a referendum on the president, saying he's very supportive of the president's agenda. How do you feel about the president's agenda? Where do you disagree and why?
Well, I'm looking forward to working with the president on any common interests we can find. I appreciate his interest in trying to bring corporations home from overseas. I'd love to help him with that. I do object somewhat to the tone that is going on in Washington, and I will chalk that up to hyperpartisanship and tribalism and the focus that all politicians seem to have out there as to which party is going to be in power and how to stop them from being in power. I am so looking forward to bringing some statesmanship, some independence, some roll up your sleeves Montana style to Congress, and that's what we need. I'm concerned that Congress is so close to broken that we need to send true public servants, true representatives that'll be responsive, transparent, work with people of all political stripes to get things done for Montana and America.
What policies of his do you disagree with? What policies do you want to oppose him on?
Well, I'll tell you, one thing that I've been talking about a lot in our agricultural sector is his approach to tariffs. And Congressman Gianforte had an opportunity to sign a letter with 107 of his Republican colleagues in Congress opposing broad tariffs and didn't sign it. And I think Montana has worked so hard to build our export markets. Montana worked 50 years to build our wheat market, and now those markets are under threat. And so that is one area that I think the policy has been dangerous.
Thank you. Congressman Gianforte, your rebuttal.
Well, I do stand with President Trump. Together, I've been at the table with him. We have delivered results for Montana. You see it in the economy. We have more jobs than we have people looking for work. Wages are going up. Unemployment's down. This is all good news. This election truly is a question between results, working with President Trump, as I'll do, or resistance and working with Nancy Pelosi and going back to the failed policies of the Obama era.
Eleanor Swanson, your chance for rebuttal.
I am the only one that won't be controlled by the speaker or a head of any political party. I am my own person. The role of law is to define and prohibit harm. Economic signals are valuable for us to find the most valuable way to serve one another. And I believe in calling balls and strikes when I agree with people or when I don't. That includes Trump and anyone else.
Thank you. Kathleen Williams, your rebuttal.
Thank you. I want to bring to the attention of Montanans that our economy has been growing since 2011. There's no way that we can, that people who are just recently in office can take claim for that. I'll also say that the Congressman Gianforte knows that in July, I said that I wouldn't be voting for Nancy Pelosi. That is public. He took that clip and put it in a commercial that said the exact opposite. We need honesty, integrity, and stateswomanship in Congress, not more lies.
Yellowstone Public Radio's Jackie Yamanaka has our next question, and it goes to Congressman Greg Gianforte.
Representative Gianforte, one of your campaign ads essentially says Ms. Williams favors open borders and amnesty for illegal aliens. When has she ever said that? And what is your preferred approach on immigration policy?
Okay, thank you for the question. I want to address this last point for just a second. Excuse me, let me go to the immigration. Twice in the Montana legislature, Kathleen Williams has voted for sanctuary cities. This harbors illegal criminal aliens that have come into this country. This is not what we want in our communities. This makes our communities less safe. I voted twice on the House floor for real immigration reform that would move us more to a merit-based immigration system, got rid of the chain lottery, protected the DACA kids, and built the wall. I'm proud to be working with President Trump to do real immigration reform, and I'll continue to do that.
And next we have Eleanor Swanson.
Well, I'm not sure I have too much to add on this topic.
Okay, Kathleen Williams.
Yeah, again, let's correct this. I did not vote for sanctuary cities. I voted against a bill that would prohibit them. There are no sanctuary cities in Montana. That was in 2011. There was no threat of them. There are no sanctuary cities now. And I will say that I believe in a strong border. We need to have a border that works well for tourism and trade, that stops effectively illegal trafficking in arms and people and weapons and drugs. And I support ICE in our border control. And we need to ensure that Congress starts working on immigration and not just accuses people about it.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I wasn't done with my response. I could have a little more time.
I'm sorry, I thought you were, go ahead.
Okay. I don't have much to say on the matter of the who said what. I believe that when we're talking about borders and immigration, we often are splitting two separate topics. One, we need safe, secure borders to make sure that there's no violent criminals, terrorists, biochemical weapons coming into our country, and then be more accepting and welcoming towards refugees and families. And the two of those combined are my policy.
Thank you. And Representative Gianforte.
Well, our current immigration policy is not working. We have illegal immigrants and narcotics pouring over our borders. I was talking to a sheriff here in Montana recently, and he told me he knows when the Mexican meth arrives in their Montana community because they see a spike in the crime rate. And for my opponent here, I would just say when you stand on the same issues and you vote like Nancy Pelosi, you'll end up standing with her back in Congress. There's a clear distinction here, and my opponent voted for sanctuary cities.
Our next question is from MTN Chief Political Reporter Mike Dennison, and it goes to Eleanor Swanson.
Ms. Swanson, in any Montana campaign of late, we hear plenty of talk about access to public lands. Where do you stand on the access and ownership status of federal lands, and do we need any change in their management?
The answer is yes, we do need to change management. There is a constitutional basis for federal ownership and control of land. Right now there's about 1 million different agencies controlling land for 1 million different purposes, and often irresponsibly so, such as the BLM checkerboard pattern, which denies access to public lands to some individuals, but not others. Right here in Montana, we have access to roads denied to people when it's dangerous, when there's fires, and we need to make sure that we have access. There's fire control measures that should be taken and are not. We can't just have stewardship of land for one purpose and ignore every other purpose. That said, public lands is a minor issue in comparison to the scope of the serious economic threats facing our country now, and it would not be a policy priority of mine.
And Kathleen Williams, your rebuttal.
I strongly favor ensuring public lands stay in public hands. I have a 35-year career in natural resources, bringing together very diverse interests to solve really thorny natural resource problems. My specialty has been in water, which cuts across all kinds of combination of resource interests. My opponent, as I've mentioned, proposed to release over 700,000 acres of protections on public lands without public comment. And we need someone in Congress that's going to be more sophisticated about our natural resource issues and solve our problems.
Thank you. Representative Gianforte, your rebuttal.
Well, the marching orders I've gotten from you have been very clear. We need to keep public lands in public hands. We need to be working to increase access, and local input is critically important. That's why I sponsored legislation that will protect East Rosebud Creek for generations. That passed into law and the president signed it. I've also championed protection of Paradise Valley. which would prevent a mine from being built on the outskirts. And one of my first hearings as a chairman of the Oversight Committee was to understand why 1/3 of all our forest roads in Montana have been gated and preventing sportsmen's access.
Thank you, Representative Gianforte. And Eleanor Swanson, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
You know, one thing that really struck me about Mr. Gianforte's answer just now, he said that he takes his marching orders from Montana. I don't take my marching orders from Montana. I take them from the Constitution and making sure that everything I do in Congress has constitutional authority. There's a constitutional limited government, and I stick to that, regardless what any majoritarian population might say to the contrary.
Thank you. Our next question is from Jackie Yamanaka, and it's for Kathleen Williams.
Ms. Williams, the free market, namely cheap natural gas, is the primary driver for the downturn in the coal industry. So why shouldn't the market determine the fate of Colstrip, just like the market determined the fate of the buggy whip?
Well, I think the market is having an impact on Colstrip and how that community can thrive in the future. It is market trends that are affecting their ability to design their future, and but there are a lot of great people in Colstrip that are really working to diversify their economy. When I was elected to the legislature, it was during the recession, and one of my big goals was to help diversify and grow our economy, which I did. Just one of my bills created 300 new Montana businesses and over, 200 new Montana businesses and over 3,000 new Montana products in just 3 years. I know how to create opportunity across Montana, both urban and rural. And I've been talking with the folks in Colstrip for quite a while about how we can ensure that that community thrives. I looked at methanogenesis, providing some opportunity for working with coal and being creative about it. And that's what we need to send to Congress, is people that are problem solvers, that'll work with folks on all sides to ensure our communities thrive.
So I'd like to follow up, please.
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out from your answer then, should coal continue on its decline?
Well, again, I think it's the market that is having the effect. The consumers of the power from Colstrip are choosing that they want to have more renewable energy, and so they are making their interests known through their buying power. And so also the rise of cheap natural gas is competing with coal. So we need an absolute, all of the above type of energy policy and ensure that we're developing opportunities for renewable energy. Those are some of the biggest job creators in this state, and there's all kinds of opportunity there.
Thank you. And Representative Gianforte.
Well, we've had a war on coal by this prior administration. I'm pleased that the Trump administration has removed the Clean Power Plan. But the last time I was out in Colstrip here, just a few months ago, the turbines were running at 10% of capacity. And I asked why, and they said because the wind is blowing. We still do not have a level playing field, because when wind blows, the markets must buy the power from the wind turbines, and they have to actually shut Colstrip down. That's not an effective way to do it. We need to get back to a level playing field, and let's let the market sort it out.
Thank you. Eleanor Swanson, your rebuttal.
I believe in taking personal responsibility for the harm that you cause others, including by pollutants. But a lot of people don't realize that we have lower carbon emissions in 2017 than we did for the past 20 years. We need to make really sure that we don't merely increase our dependence on foreign energy. That would be absolutely the wrong tactic. And for Montana, that often means that we need to use our own resources in a responsible way.
Kathleen Williams, your final rebuttal.
Well, I would say that Congressman Gianforte is suggesting the market sort it out, but that's the problem. The market is sorting it out right now. We need to ensure that communities that are overly dependent on one sector have an opportunity to diversify. There are all kinds of options. There's great people working on this. I am so looking forward to carrying any proposals to the federal government that Colstrip comes up with and helping with those. There's some genius ideas coming forward, and I look forward to working on them.
We'll move on to our next question, and it's from MTN's Samantha Sullivan, and it's for Congressman Greg Gianforte.
Congressman, as you've mentioned tonight, you've aligned yourself with the president on a lot of his policies, but the president has imposed tariffs and engaged in trade wars that may hurt Montana ag markets. When it comes down to it, do you stand with the president or do you stand with Montana ag?
Yeah, and I've been very clear on this. I will always stand with Montana. I've had a chance to talk to the president twice face-to-face on this, and my encouragement to him was to bring these trade negotiations to a close. I've said all along I don't favor broad-based tariffs. We have not been treated fairly in many of these arrangements, and 80% of our grain goes overseas. As I've met with farmers and ranchers across the state, we need free and open access to these foreign markets for our ag producers to thrive. But we still have issues with Canada. For example, grain going into Canada gets graded at feed quality. This is not fair trade. I encourage Ambassador Lighthizer, the trade ambassador, to handle that in the NAFTA agreements. I was pleased to see Mexico come to the table. It looks like the president's making progress with Europe. I will continue to apply pressure to make sure we continue to have free and open access to foreign markets.
All right, and Eleanor Swanson, your rebuttal.
Well, the great thing about free trade is that it's mutually beneficial for everyone. There's a natural human right to sell and buy things at the free, fair market value. And I don't stand with anyone messing with those really important economic signals that help us discover the most valuable way to serve one another.
Kathleen Williams, your rebuttal.
It's been my honor to spend much of my career working with farmers and ranchers in Montana and the West. I am absolutely committed to rural Montana. I want to see our small communities thrive and be vital. I have been raising the tariff issue for months, and I'm just not seeing any leadership at the congressional level from Congressman Gianforte or others. We're doing foreign policy with a sledgehammer instead of a scalpel, and it's hard to see an exit strategy, and I'm looking forward to getting to Congress so I can be helpful at the time when it's needed, which is early, not when this is already happening.
Congressman Gianforte, your final rebuttal.
Well, I've been encouraged because I have a seat at the table with the president, having been on Air Force One twice here in the last couple of months, been into the Oval Office, and had the ability to bend his ear on issues that are important in Montana, and few could be more important than our ag community. We will continue to apply pressure to get these relationships brought to a close. The reality is we've been in a trade war for decades. It's just that the U.S. has not taken the field. And for the first time, we have someone who's standing up for us. We cannot let this continue indefinitely. However, we need to bring them to a close.
Thank you. Jackie Yamanaka, you have the next question, and it's for Eleanor Swanson.
Ms. Swanson, what federal policies are you advocating to address the epidemic of opioids and methamphetamine?
Well, as a libertarian, I believe there's a natural human right to live free. And that's for every peaceful, mentally competent adult who is not harming anyone else. And you know, when it comes to some of these harder drugs, not opioids necessarily, that's between the doctor and the patient. You know, it's a matter of determining whether or not someone's mentally competent or not. Otherwise, you have a natural freedom to take marijuana, raw milk, cigarettes, alcohol, sugar, and decide for yourself the risks and benefits. When we permit people to make these decisions for themselves, such as by offering them other alternatives, such as marijuana, in Colorado they saw a decrease in opioid addiction when they freed up these other markets and possibilities for people.
Kathleen Williams, your rebuttal.
Yeah, addiction is just such a concerning problem, and really in Montana, it's my understanding that meth is really the concern over opioids, but all of these are concerned, including alcohol. I've supported treatment courts. The addiction issues are complex, and I will say that one of the places where these issues are strongest are on our areas that are experiencing poverty. So we need to work to ensure opportunity and ensure that that we have the services we need to help people that find themselves in an addicted state.
Thank you. And Congressman Gianforte, your rebuttal.
Well, I'm proud of the results that Congress, as your congressman, we've delivered in this area. Just this week, we passed a package of bills that's been through the Senate and the House specifically to address opioid and meth issues. I'm also a fan of treatment courts. We personally helped get the one going in Lake County. I visited the one in Yellowstone County, Gallatin County. We need one up in the Flathead. These focus more on rehabilitation of nonviolent drug offenders as opposed to incarceration. That's a step in the right direction.
Thank you. And Eleanor Swanson, your rebuttal.
I agree with Mr. Gianforte that we need to take rehabilitative steps when we have addiction situations with harder drugs like methamphetamines, getting people off of the street into inpatient treatment that's rehabilitative rather than the prison systems.
All right. Our next question comes from Samantha Sullivan, and it's for Kathleen Williams.
Ms. Williams, are you concerned about the growing inequality when it comes to income in the United States? We have the top 1% controlling a larger and larger portion of the nation's wealth, while wages for the average person have sort of remained stagnant. Do we just accept this, or are there steps we can take to close that gap?
Thanks for bringing that up, because again, the tax giveaway aggravated the growing income disparity between everyday working Montanans and the ultra wealthy, like Congressman Gianforte. So I complained about that tax bill. I was vice chair of the Montana Taxation Committee in the House in 2015, where we passed fiscally responsible tax policy. And you're right. The wages now have about the same buying power as wages in 1978. There are a lot of people that have not been able to progress while the upper 1% and 10% are making record profits. So yes, I'm concerned about the growing income disparity. I've been talking about that since 2011 on the House floor. One of the things that I advanced in the legislature, we laid the groundwork for an earned income tax credit, which really helps folks at the working families at the lower levels, and I want to continue to help close that gap.
Tim, I'd like to ask a follow-up question, if I may.
Absolutely.
Do you support then higher taxes on the wealthy?
I think the tax giveaway is going to require a bunch of fixes. There are mistakes in it. There are loopholes that weren't closed. That thing was 1,000 pages long. I can't imagine that Representative Gianforte actually read that. There were handwritten amendments in the margins. So we need to send someone to Congress that has tax background that can help fix this thing.
Thank you. Congressman Gianforte, your rebuttal.
Well, it's important that we look at the facts here. The tax plan, the first overhaul of this plan in over 30 years, really helped lower income families. We doubled the child tax credit. We doubled the standard deduction. That single mom I talked about in Helena earlier, raising 3 kids, her paycheck went up $400 a month. There's been allegations that somehow this was done for the rich. According to the Billings Gazette, my taxes actually went up. That's what my accountant's telling me too. So this was not a giveaway for the wealthy. My wife and I have prospered here, and I will work to help the rest of Montana prosper as well.
Thank you. And Eleanor Swanson, your rebuttal.
You know, I'm going to repeat myself because I think it's just that important. In 1931, we had no debt. Now we have more debt than any other country in the world. For every $20 that America makes, the federal government takes 3, borrows 1, and spends 4. They say that every young Republican is a libertarian, and every young Democrat is a libertarian too. They just don't realize it yet. I'm not sure our country's finances can wait long enough for these folks to grow up.
Thank you. And Kathleen Williams, your rebuttal.
I agree that the debt is an incredible problem. Just the budget that was passed yesterday, I guess, Congressman Gianforte has supported a balanced budget, then voted for the tax giveaway, then talked about a balanced budget, then voted for a budget that increased the deficit, then voted against one that funded the the defense and Pell Grants. I mean, he's just all over the map. We need some consistency. And I'll say that even putting more dollars in people's pocketbooks when their health care costs are going up by double digits each year, and inflation, it's not helping on the net.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And Mike Dennison, you have the next question for Congressman Gianforte.
Representative Gianforte, you said that a top priority of yours is tackling the high cost of prescription drugs. So what have you and Republicans in Congress done about it?
Okay, so we know Obamacare has failed. We've seen, for you at home, you know your premiums have gone through the roof and benefits have gone down. Obamacare didn't, so I support repealing and replacing it. But the replacement can't just be insurance reform. It's got to deal with underlying costs. That's why I was one of only 2 members of Congress invited to the White House when the president rolled out his prescription drug plan, where he has brought somebody in from the pharmaceuticals industry that works together, who knows how these things work, to put some boundaries on this to get costs under control. But prescription drugs alone will not get costs down. We can't move to a one-size-fits-all, government-run healthcare, Medicare for all, as the other party has advocated for, because it will bankrupt this country. We need to move to more choices. That's why just in July we expanded the use of HSAs, health savings accounts, and we've also added the ability for association healthcare plans. These will all work to bring costs down.
Thank you, Congressman Gianforte. Eleanor Swanson, your rebuttal.
What was the question again?
The question was about, I'd like to follow up on Mr. Gianforte. I didn't hear any specifics about what Congress is going to do about prescription drugs there in your first answer.
So on prescription drugs, when we give a company a monopoly, it comes with some requirements on pricing. And you as consumers out there know that there is price gouging going on. Drugs available in Canada and Mexico are often 1/10 of the price that they are in this country. So we need to work for increased transparency and fairness in drug pricing.
Ms. Watson, are you ready?
You know, a huge part of why our health insurance is so expensive is because we are requiring it to cover everything. And we're fighting about what it covers. Will it cover tubal ligations? Will it cover birth control? And that's part of the problem of this centrally provided health insurance, is we have to fight about those things. We get used to making life decisions for each other, and then you get a situation like Alfie in the UK, where parents are prohibited at armed guards from leaving with their child to seek a second opinion. We can't get used to making medical decisions for one another, and that will increase prosperity.
Thank you. Kathleen Williams, your rebuttal.
Thank you. I've been proud to work on healthcare issues in the Montana legislature. It took me 4 years, but I ensured that insurers wouldn't deny routine cancer care costs to cancer patients. That's actually saving lives. I have worked so hard to improve accessibility and affordability of healthcare in Montana. I look forward to doing it in Congress. One easy thing to do that I support is allowing Medicare to bargain for drug prices. And whereas my opponent supported a plan that would turn Medicare into a voucher system, and that's really not what our seniors need.
Thank you, Kathleen Williams. And Mr. Gianforte, your rebuttal.
Well, the other side has been advocating for Medicare for all. Unfortunately, Medicare for all will be Medicare for none, because it will bankrupt this country. The economists say that that would actually cost $32 trillion, and it would steal money from seniors and change Medicare in a way that we would never recognize it. Economists have also said to pay for that, we would have to double everyone's income tax rate to pay for Medicare for all. We need to preserve Medicare for our seniors along with Social Security. We're going to do that with a strong economy and strong federal tax revenues as a result.
All right, thank you, Congressman Gianforte. That concludes the question and answer portion of this debate. Right now, we're going to jump right into the closing statements, and each candidate will have 90 seconds for their closing statement. We'll begin with Kathleen Williams.
Montanans deserve someone that will keep their promises in Congress. I promise to you that I will work to fix health care, that I will foster opportunity for all Montanans, not just special interests, that I'll protect our environment and outdoor heritage, that I'll bring civility and integrity and stateswomanship, in my case, to a broken Congress, and that we'll work to rebuild our place in the world. Congressman Gianforte has broken promises. He promised to be Montana's voice in Congress, yet he won't allow members of the public to comment in congressional briefings, for example, in Hamilton. He promised to be a voice for agriculture, but he refused to sign that letter with his colleagues that expressed concern against broad tariffs, and now our markets are suffering. He promised to be an advocate for health care. All he's voted for is repealing, and there's no leadership in replacing, and we need constructive health care reform. He promised to be a voice for our seniors, but he's supported proposals that would turn Medicare into a voucher system. And he promised to protect our public lands, but he's already proposing removal of 770,000 acres of protections. I will commit to fulfilling promises. We need integrity, honesty, and someone who's fair and transparent in Congress, and I so look forward, with your honor of your vote, to being your next Congresswoman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen Williams. Eleanor Swanson, your final closing statement.
Nothing matters to me than my values. I am the only candidate who will uphold and respect the entire Constitution, including the Bill of Rights. I will respect the constitutionally limited role of the federal government. The new political spectrum is not left versus right. It's personal autonomy versus authoritarianism. It's equal liberty broadly and objectively defined, or great injustice. It's prosperity or economic catastrophe. Actions speak louder than words. Both of my opponents' voting records promise that they will add increased federal spending, increased federal debt, and that they will make decisions for you in a top-down manner instead of respecting your right to make your decisions for yourself. People's lives are not chess pieces on a board to move around. My vote, nor your vote, are political games. I will never vote to spend money that we do not have. I will never vote without first asking if I have the moral and constitutional authority to do so. I ask you to hold yourself to the same standard. I ask you for your courageous vote, to vote out of faith and not fear of what could be worse. And if you vote for me, I will win.
Thank you, Eleanor Swanson. And Greg Gianforte, Congressman, your final closing statement.
Well, Montana's special. That's why Susan and I decided to raise our 4 kids here. It's why we built our business in our home. And it's why I ran for Congress, to protect our Montana way of life. I'm honored to serve as your congressman. It's a responsibility I take very seriously. In my first 60 days, I traveled to all 56 counties, and I've yet to spend a weekend in Washington, D.C. I'm proud to be working with President Trump and delivering results. Wages are going up, unemployment is at record lows, and the economy is booming. Working with President Trump has also made our communities safer. We're securing our border. We're rebuilding our military. We're taking care of our veterans, and we're protecting our Second Amendment. Having a seat at the table with President Trump is delivering results for Montana. Ultimately, though, this election is about competing ideas. Do you want someone who's going to work with President Trump to deliver results, or someone who will join the resistance and stand with Nancy Pelosi? I humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you, Congressman Gianforte. Thank you to all of the candidates for taking time tonight to help inform the voters. Thank you to our panelists for your hard work and dedication here too. And of course, our cast and crew in the back room doing a great job as well. Thank you for watching tonight's MTN coverage of the U.S. House debate. We'll have more coverage on tonight's 10 o'clock news. And we hope that you'll join us next Saturday night at 6 when we bring you the U.S. Senate debate. For Samantha Sullivan, Jackie Yamanaka, and Mike Dennison, I'm Tim McGonigal. Have a great night.